Excellent. I think that's enough to get started with. We'll crack on. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you. My name is Tudor Price. I'm talking to you from the Kent and Medway Growth Hub, which is a business support service which has access to all the publicly funded support across the county. I also work for the Kent and Victor Chamber of Commerce, but I'm here in the Growth Hub capacity today. Welcome to another of the Q&A sessions that we have been running. This is one of the series we've run now as each lockdown milestone has been reached, working with Kent County Council Trading Standards. And we have, as before, assembled a panel of expertise, the great and the good in all matters COVID, secure, lockdown, and so forth. So we will be doing our best to try and answer the questions that many of you have submitted to us already. Some notes, first of all, this is being recorded. So obviously you'll be able to get hold of this. What normally happens is a bit of editing, some subtitles are added, and then it'll be emailed out to you a few days after the event. So be patient and it will arrive with you in due course. We are taking questions in the live chat. So if you haven't had a chance to put in your questions beforehand, then please do use the live chat and we will make sure we try and get to them throughout the course of the next 1 hour, which is the duration of this Q&A session. So we'll be concluding at 2 o'clock. We've got a bit of flexibility there, so don't worry. If we haven't got around to your question, we'll try and make sure that we squeeze a few minutes in towards the end there. I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, give a quick talk about who they are and what they do, their credentials and why they're here with us today. And then, of course, we will move on to the questions that you've submitted already, and we'll just take it from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce to you first, Deirdre Wells from Visit Kent. Deirdre, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tudor. Thank you for having me. So yes, I'm Deirdre Wells. I'm Chief Executive of Visit Kent, and I'm here with one message, which is go to the pub, go to a restaurant, go to a visitor attraction, and go to them now. Well, maybe not now, maybe next week. So yes, hugely excited to be with you to answer all of your questions, because this is a really important stage, probably the biggest stage, I think, in the roadmap for our industry. So looking forward to getting all those visitors back to your businesses and supporting local business in Kent.
Excellent. Thank you, Deirdre. Exciting times ahead for us. Long waited. Tracy, good afternoon, Tracy.
Oh, good afternoon, Tudor. I'm Tracy Beattie. I'm the Environmental Health Manager for 3 local authorities in Kent: Tunbridge Wells, Maidstone and Swale. I also act as the chairman for the Kent Environmental Health Managers Group. So I'm going to do my best to punt for environmental health. Thank you.
Excellent, and I'm sure you're doing an admirable job. Thank you very much, Tracy. Good afternoon, Steve. Nice to have you with us, Steve.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Andrews. I'm Head of Central Operations at South East Water.
Brilliant, thank you, Steve. And you've got a few words to share with us once we've done the introductions. Nathan, good afternoon.
Tudor, hello everybody. My name is Nathan Martin. I'm the Principal Trading Standards Officer for Kent Trading Standards, working in the Business Advice Services team. I'll be answering your questions on which businesses can reopen, and I'll also do my best to chip in where required or invited to do so by Environment Health on sort of social distancing issues as well.
And last but by no means least, Jim, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Tudor. Hi to everybody. I'm the chair of the COVID Enforcement Cell, which represents all authorities across Kent and Medway. So I'm here today just to provide any advice and guidance on enforcement issues for any enforcement agency. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Now, for what we failed to sort of try and get across or answer here today, you will have the opportunity, if you wish to book some more time with any one of the experts here. You can give the Growth Hub a call on 03333 602 300. That number's in the live chat. Go through there, ask to speak to one of these guys, and we'll book a call back from them so they can sort of try and go through in a bit more detail or put you in touch with the relevant expertise. So if you don't get the full answer here, you have that opportunity to follow up at a later date. As is always sort of the way, as has been over the last few sessions that we've run, really, the legislation is published very late in the day. And I think we've all experienced that. It's incredibly frustrating for you as businesses, but it's also frustrating for the regulators and those involved in sort of trying to navigate the industry. because we are working with information that is literally just sort of hot off the press, and the ink is still wet, and sometimes there are drafting errors, there are inconsistencies, and it's very hard to try and give a definitive answer. What you will get from the team here today is the best possible understanding of the regulations as they stand at the moment. The thing to bear in mind, and has always been worth mentioning, is that the overarching principle here is to try and make sure that people stay safe and do their best to comply with the regulations as we know them to be. No one's trying to catch you out. Jim and his team are not looking around with a kosh, roaming around the streets trying to catch you out and sort of put you in clink. No one wants to do that. Everyone is trying to give you the best possible advice to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So try not to be alarmed. Please do feel free to ask questions, however simple you might think they are. It's really important. If you're thinking it, someone else is probably thinking it as well. Okay. Right, so we have some pre-prepared questions, and we are starting to get some questions in on the live chat as well, which is absolutely great. So please do pop them in there. But first, I'm going to come across to Steve, who is going to just give us a few sort of top tips, because some of you may have had sort of tanks and water pipes sort of standing still for the last few weeks, months even, and of course that has an implication, doesn't it, Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Tudor. Yeah, it's just a few tips to ensure that you're going to reopen the businesses safely. As Tudor says, if your business has been shut down for a period of time and there's been no turnover of that water, what we're encouraging businesses to do is give the system a full flush through. So open the taps and leave them running for a good 10 minutes to make sure all that water that's been sitting in the pipework is transferred through, and you bring some nice clean water through. If you have got storage tanks, we recommend that you inspect those storage tanks and, where possible, drain them right down and refill them up. That just ensures that the chlorine that we add to the water as part of the disinfection process will come through into your system. If you have a Legionella risk assessment, we'd ask that you review your Legionella risk assessment before introducing customers into those areas, and make sure you're following all of the advice on that. If there's any other questions on water supply, please put them in the chat. We're more than happy to come out and visit businesses if they've got problems. If you've got a strange taste or odour in the water, please give us a call and we'll arrange for a technician to come out and help you.
Steve, that's brilliant, sound advice, and I really appreciate you guys making the time to sort of be with us here today as well. It's something that was quite easily overlooked, and yet obviously certainly in the hospitality industry, leisure industry, there's some serious consequences to not taking due notice of your advice. Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to leap across to questions, and one of the first ones I've picked up here is from String Wind Repairs. So this is coming across to Nathan and possibly Tracy. So being a repair business, I have been open, of course, as they're allowed to do so, but do I still need to be by appointment only? So prior to, of course, by appointments, now have things changed? So Nathan first.
Thank you, Tudor, sorry. There is no restriction, no requirement for the chap to open purely by appointment only. The business is allowed to be open, so he can open it, and the members of the public are allowed to enter his business freely. However, that said, he must still operate in a way that is going to minimise the risk of transmission of the virus. So throughout this process, we would have completed a risk assessment. If that risk assessment has identified that it probably would not be safe at this point for him to allow people to enter in more than ones or twos, for example, then he should probably continue to be operating by appointment only. If his risk assessment, the size of his business, the precautions he can put in place, etc., are sufficient to minimise the risk of transmission of the virus, then there's no reason why he can't operate as he did, prior to lockdown.
So again, those principles of sort of trying to keep people safe is sort of coming through strongly there, I thought, especially as we relax some things. Tracy, do you want to add anything to that at all in terms of some best practice measures they might have?
Well, I think Nathan covered most of that, but I would say it's really difficult to give specific advice to an individual business, because we don't know whether you work from a cupboard or whether you work in a palace. So it really is, your business best. When you look at a risk assessment, it's just identifying the most hazardous things that you have. So it's just specifically looking at hands, face, space, and applying that to your situation. I think that's a common sense approach, really. really.
Absolutely. No, I quite agree. Thank you very much, Tracy. Okay, another question here. This one is from car valeters. Nathan, we're going to come back to you on this one. Car valeters, they seem to have been singled out a little bit. They feel quite hard put upon. Can car valeters be open before the 17th of May?
Yeah, car valeting businesses were allowed to open from the 12th of April. So yes, you can open up.
Excellent. There you go. Nice and simple, that one. I love that. Okay. Deirdre, we're going to come to you next. There's a question in here from Serviced Short Stays, one of the many businesses which, of course, have been sitting there patiently waiting for their turn to come. Are there any restrictions to opening a holiday let? How do I check that I've received all the support and grants that I am eligible for? Interesting. Two questions in one. So a bit of finance and a bit of regulation. What have you got?
Okay. Yeah. So yes, you can open, and also you are subject, I suppose, to the normal restrictions, which is if it's a small holiday let that you it's rule of 6 or 2 households. So you can have, one of the things I think that's been frustrating people over the last period is, quite often for holiday lets, you have 2 families, holidaying together, and that hasn't been possible. It will be from next week. The question about have I got everything, all things that are due to me, really worth checking. So do speak to your local authority, because there was a lot of funding brought in for tourism businesses early doors, but actually one of the things that's happened is a lot of businesses slightly fell through the cracks. So there's been some further funding, it's called ARG funding. Do check with your local authority that you have got it, or that you're eligible. Any tourism business should be eligible for some grants, so always worth checking.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the ARG. One of the things obviously the Growth Hub does is, in theory, we should know what funding is going on out there. I've just posted into the live chat a link to a webpage which has a little searchable facility specifically around the COVID grant scheme. So additional restrictions grant, the restart grant, all those sort of things. You can search by your local authority area, and then it'll show you what's currently closed, what's open, and then obviously the criteria accordingly. So have a check there. Again, if you're not sure, give us a call, 0333 602 300, and we'll just make sure that you have access. I'll just touch on that briefly because there's been a few funding questions elsewhere. So I'll just cover on that while I'm sort of on and chatting. So around there's sort of 2 funding sort of areas, if you like. Now, one is around sort of business growth and sort of encouraging you to sort of do things. The other one is obviously sort of recovery stuff, which is all to do with the government support measures, things like the lockdown grant, the additional restrictions grant, ARG, which Deirdre just mentioned there, and of course the restart grant, which was just announced a little while ago by the Treasury. They're all delivered at a local authority level. So your council will be the people who will be dishing out the cash. All right. Now they will have a web page, and if you're not sure which ones to go to and how to get there, again, visit the Growth Hub website, the link that's in the chat there, and you can sort of work out which one you need to be going to. Different local authorities have got to different stages. Some have really run through their cash very quickly and got it out the door, and now they are just taking expressions of interest for second rounds or any applications that fail later. Others are still open and are still trying to get the money out the door because they haven't had enough applicants. So it's really worthwhile you taking the time to check. If you are in rateable property, you're paying business rates, or you are rateable but you're not paying business rates because you qualify for small business rate relief, you will fall under one of the sort of possibly the restart grant or one of the other ones, because they tend to be linked to your rateable property. If, however, you are not in a rateable property, that's not a showstopper, you will probably come under what's called the additional restrictions grant, the ARG. It's a bit more discretionary, and each local authority will have their own little sort of twist on it, depending on what they're trying to support locally. So pop onto the website, link this in the chat, have a look. If you're not sure, contact us at 0333 602 300, and we will try and help navigate you to the right place. Okay, let's go back to some more questions here. Interesting. We've had one in from Vicky Kerr on the live chat. Is there any legislation re self-testing for business owners? So I'm going to come to you, Tracy, on this one. Obviously, there's quite a bit around this now about businesses coming back, and where are we with the whole sort of regulations around people having to sort of test before they do stuff? And certainly if you're self-employed, do you need to prove you've been testing before you go and see clients or stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I might throw this over to Jim as well. The legislation is around self-isolation when you have a positive test result. So that the responsibility is on the businesses to ensure that they support individuals who they employ who have had a positive test, because obviously we want to limit the spread of the virus. With regard to self-testing, I know that the government did have a sort of like an opportunity where businesses could register and they could get the lateral flow test sent directly to them. But I'm not certain, I think that window might have closed now. So I know that you can go to your local pharmacy and pick up the lateral flow tests, and it is good practice. Certainly public health are promoting testing twice a week, particularly if you are out in the business world or sort of engaging with businesses and or other people. So it is a good practice to do that. So that's what my advice would be. Jim, have you got any sort of further advice that you know of?
Oh, just trying to hit the mute button there. I'm just checking this one online, and it appears that for the free testing that was available to people to set yourself up as a business, the window on that closed on the 12th of April. So basically they're now saying if you haven't registered, and this is on a government website, which I shall hopefully paste into the link shortly, if you haven't registered, then it could be that you ask staff if they can get rapid lateral flow tests at home or via NHS. So that's what it is. There isn't specific legislation stating that you must do it, but obviously if you wanted to, the window for doing it free has now gone. So I'll make that available in the link so that people can see that link to the government guidance at the moment. Yeah,
the only other sort of thing I would support is that lateral flow testing it's good business continuity, because it's in your interest to make sure that you know of any sort of positive cases that you have in your workplace, really.
Absolutely. So, no, it makes perfect sense. Deirdre, I'm going to bring you in on that, because I know obviously you've been advocating, communicating with customers, making sure that businesses are sort of highlighting their COVID safe credentials. There's the Good to Go scheme, which I think is Visit England's scheme. Got some tips and advice on what they might want to be doing?
I think, well, two things. One is to make sure that you're following all the protocols to the letter. That nothing is going to make your customers feel safer than knowing that you are really on it in terms of your hygiene regime, and that you've put all those, you and your staff have put all those protocols in place. Colleagues at the association leading visitor attractions have got a wonderful phrase, which is sanitize your hands, not your experience, because I think one of the worries is that you're going to end up with a very kind of sterile feel to the visitor experience. But actually all the evidence is that you can do both. You can visibly demonstrate, if you visibly demonstrate that you are keeping your environment clean and COVID safe, then actually people start to relax a bit. That doesn't mean that you can't be super friendly, super welcoming, both actually on your website as well as in person, because a lot of our attractions are now requiring people to book in advance rather than just rock up. Actually, it gives you a really good opportunity as a business to be able to have a friendly conversation without a mask in advance. So I think as much as possible, use your website to send out the reassuring messages that you are really doing this well, but also all of those welcoming messages about the sort of experience they're going to have when they get there. It also helps you a little bit to manage some of those expectations. So if things have to be a little bit different, if people are going to be, you're expecting obviously people to maintain social distance and follow markings on the floor, it's just worth walking people through that in advance if you can, because that tends to ensure that people behave a little bit better when they get there. So I think, yeah, as much as you can, demonstrate what you're doing. It will make people feel more confident.
Excellent sound advice. There you go. Vicky, hopefully that's answered your question. Do just come back to us if you want to add some more to that. Before we move on to the next question, I'm just going to ask if anyone from the Kent Farmers Markets Association is with us today. If they could just sort of say hello, yes, or in the live chat, and we'll come to you. We've got a few little follow-up questions to the ones you submitted earlier. Okay, let's just move across to another question here. So, Deirdre, this is another one for you. This is from The Relish. I own a B&B. Can we open to full room capacity, and can we serve a staggered sit-down breakfast?
I love this session because I'm basically just saying, yes, you can. I'm going to make a T-shirt. Yes, you can. Again, I mean, Nathan said it very eloquently at the beginning, social distancing is still the key, and it will be until 21st of June at the very latest. So I know we're all about hugging and all the rest of it. So I'm assuming that the people that you have in the room together are in the same household, or certainly there's no more than 6 in a room. But joking aside, what happens in the room probably stays in the room. In terms of the breakfast room, yes, I think the requirement to keep people seated is still in place. Staggered meal times, really good idea. Yeah, you know, as Tracy mentioned, depends on whether your B&B's in a cupboard or a palace as to how big your breakfast room is, but it's all about maintaining that distance. So yes, you can open, yes, you can do staggered service as long as you can maintain social distancing.
Super. Tracy, I'm just going to come to you because obviously in terms of sort of keeping the distances and sort of the 1 meter, 2 meter and mitigating screens and stuff like that, have you got any good tips or advice that could be applied in these sort of situations?
Well, there are lots of innovative practices out there, but these sort of the fundamental is 2 meters between tables or between guests at tables. If you need to go closer, because obviously we may not all have the palace room, you've got to have sort of 1 meter plus mitigation. So mitigation could be screens, it could be placing tables back to back so that there's 2 meters between the customers that are facing each other. I haven't sort of seen anything else out there. When I went out last weekend, it was outside, obviously, and it rained. I have to say, it was I think that was sort of like, you know, well, it's been so dry and lovely, and I go out and it rains. But anyway, but no, within sort of B&Bs, guest houses, hotels, the same sort of rules will apply. So sort of 1 meter plus.
That's great, thank you.
Can I come in as well?
Yeah, please do, Nathan. Yeah, jump in.
All I would say as well, try out, see if Tracy agrees with me. I would recommend, regardless of how you normally run your service, whether it's like a buffet, people to serve themselves, that you do consider going to a table service. People obviously are going to have to sit, make sure they're seated while they're eating their food and drink. But if you can avoid them having to get up, get their own breakfast, touch the same tongs as other people, that sort of thing, I think that'd be a very good idea as well.
Yeah, actually, Nathan, that's a really good point, because I think one of the other questions was sort of about breakfast. Can people have breakfast and at B&Bs? I was thinking, well, okay, yes, you do get buffets, don't you? So it may be that you sort of modify your offer so that you do a sort of like you offer them a list pre the breakfast to say, well, what would you like, and we'll bring it to your table, that way round, rather than just sort of enabling them to get up, which we wouldn't allow now. Yeah.
This harks back, I think, to was it the end of lockdown 2? Was it? I think end of lockdown 2, where suddenly everyone had table apps. You know, you could go into and you place your order, drinks, something like that. So yeah, we might see those sort of being resurrected possibly as a temporary measure. But excellent. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So talking of tables, indoor tables, there was a question here from Spirited Sally Readings. When can indoors stall-based events start again? Indoor stall-based events. There's a couple of little catchwords in there. So Nathan, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
Thank you very much. Indoor events can take place again from the 17th of May. So start step 3. What the government has done is they've put some hard and fast rules on the number of people that can participate in them. So what they've said is if you're running an indoors event, you can have up to 50% occupancy that you would normally have, or 1,000 people, whichever is smaller. So the question that this lady is particularly asked, I don't think she's going to have to worry for spirit readings whether there's more than 1,000 people there, but for indoor events,
it'll be very
general,
popular. You never know. You never know.
It could be. Indoor events in general, it's 50% capacity, up to 1,000 people, and that 1,000 is the number of people in the room. So over the course of the day, if you've got a whole day event or whatever, you could allow more than 1,000 people in over the course of the day, but no more than 1,000 in the room at the same time.
Excellent. Tracy, I've got a question here which crosses over again. We're talking about stall holders here. This is from the Penshurst Farmers Market. Can our stall holders offer tastings of their products? I do hope the answer is yes, because I love going around those farmers markets and eating cheese and God knows what else. Where are we on this one?
Well, I better say yes then, hadn't I?
Thank you. Not on my account, please.
No.
What does the law say?
No, the law is silent on the matter, but I think if we look at the principles of what we want to achieve, which is hands, face and space. So if you are providing tastings for people, you don't want to have a gathering of people around your stall to do that. So it would be trying to manage the people so that you don't get more than 6, I would suggest, or sort of you manage it so that you just offer a few items, I don't know, let's say fudge or cheese on a platter, and that you hands, face and space, so you keep your distance from them. But no, there isn't any sort of rule to say that you can't do it.
Okay, that's interesting. That'd be quite encouraging. So there's another question about farmers markets here, which is when will the wearing of face masks and social distancing become optional when selling from market stalls? I think that's sort of been covered off by the Prime Minister's statement the other day, wasn't it? Nathan, can I just ask you or Tracy? I'm not sure who's best to go to on this one.
Well, I'll chip in, but Tracy as well, certainly. The government roadmap says they would like. I would ideally like to remove limits on social distancing from 21st of June, I think it is. But there's a heavy caveat on that to say that they'll be doing a study at that time. And there's always the possibility that by social distancing now referring to the number of people in groups, that sort of thing. I personally suspect, bearing in mind that they've said that even with 100% vaccination, we're still going to have a lot of vulnerable people in the community, that some sort of mitigation will need to be done for quite a long time afterwards. I suspect you will still see people being asked to wear masks for quite a while after that. And also, I know a lot of these things happen outdoors. Mask wearing, there's no requirement to wear masks outdoors under usual circumstances, but you also get quite a lot of these market stalls which are sufficiently enclosed that they would be considered indoors. And my personal opinion is people should be wearing masks, but Tracy would know a lot better than me on that one.
Well, I was just, it is, where is the market? Is it outdoors? And the other thing I think Deirdre sort of mentioned, sort of it's about giving your customers confidence, isn't it? So I think there's been some sort of social sort of behaviour sort of studies which say that if the business operator sets the standard, other people follow that standard. So if the stallholders and the market adhere to good practices, then so will their clients and customers coming in. So I would say, yeah, is it inside? What are your client base? Are they sort of young and sort of less likely to be sort of vulnerable, or are they fearless, or are they going to be the more mature individual who is more vulnerable and more cautious? So I think you've got to sort of hold that into stead as well as sort of the requirements that the government are saying, which is that social distancing needs to continue in shops, restaurants and workplaces and all those other places. So it's where people of different from different sectors, different backgrounds, they're all merging on one place. So you're sort of acting as a honeypot, basically. So you just need to put those social distancing practices in place, I think.
It's that gathering again, Jim. I guess I'm going to sort of preempt a little bit what you might say on this matter around the sort of the gathering again. I think we talked about this when it was important for takeaway, for off licenses and for public houses and stuff, about not providing any seating outside, so people weren't gathering. Take your drink and disappear. Don't gather, disperse. Jim, is that the sort of thing that you're looking for from your side, making sure that there aren't gatherings still? Is that the key thing, or is it more circumspect than that?
Gatherings would still be an issue, and also just going back to the face masks again, that's still, as the legislation stands today, that's still there for relevant places, which Tracy's alluded to in the fact about indoor spaces and things like that. So, but who knows what's going to change, if they're going to change or adapt the legislation, because it's not just one piece of legislation that we're talking about here. So you've got the steps regulations, which provides the relaxations that we're going through, but you've then also got the legislation that deals with face masks as well. So you're talking at two different points that would have to be reviewed and changed. So again, if businesses are unsure post the 17th, then they can come back to us and we can provide that guidance when we know exactly what the legislation states. But gatherings would still be an issue. And as we said at the last one in relation to face masks, people are asking about enforcement on that. And that is still an issue for the police and British Rail Police.
Yeah.
But as we said last time on enforcement, the key point is that all enforcement agencies in Kent and across Kent and Medway, we've all agreed to the 4 E's principle. So that would mean that we would engage with businesses, we'd then look to explain, encourage, and then the final step is enforcement. So as you said at the very top of this, Tudor, it's about trying to get people to do the right thing and stay safe within their own environment.
And may I say, actually, feedback we've had from the business community that we've been dealing with, they're really appreciative of that sort of light touch approach. I think it's been reassuring, and hopefully that that'll encourage more engagement in the future with sort of regulators. There's a question which just came in, it's a bit late here, so this is says, sorry I was late in. I can't pronounce the name because it's an email address, so I'm not quite sure which part of the surname which is the main forename. This question of social distancing in a restaurant, what is the rule? Question. My research locally with my competitors is they are likely to ignore it. Oh, this is going to be an issue, I think. Jim, I'm going to just test you on this one, because as we sort of see this gradual build up of momentum as sort of people sort of start to break into a sprint for the shoreline, it's going to be tricky to try and keep a level playing field. Is that something that you sort of have planned for to some extent?
I mean, this would be difficult, and it'd be down to the agencies at a local level, but obviously through the cell we would like to coordinate that. But there are still certain things that you still can't do. So you and Tracy can just hopefully back me up on this, but it's things like mingling, and it's that if you're going in your group of 6 or the 2 households, you've got to stay in those discrete groups, and if you're not, then that could then cause an enforcement issue for people to deal with. So enforcement teams will be out and about as they would be within the nighttime economy. If issues are being brought to people's attention, then as I've said, it's going to go through the 4 E's process, whether it's trading standards, environmental health, the police, or even the health and safety executive, etc. Any of those agencies are going to look at it and try and see if they can get to a point where it is safe and in compliance with the legislation. If not, and if people deliberately go out of their way to do the wrong thing, then enforcement action is still available. But as we've said, that would be the last resort once you've gone through the 3 previous steps.
Excellent. Nathan, do you want to add anything to that at all? I think Jim's really covered it quite nicely, but anything you think to chip in?
Just that, whether people like it or not, unfortunately, social distancing is still required in a cafe, bar, restaurant setting. People are required to consume their food and drink at a table. If they're from the same household, then I guess there's not too much of an issue of them being socially distanced at the table. But if they're not from the same household, so if they're 6 people from different households, then they should still be socially distanced even at the table, and those tables should be socially distanced from other tables. So unfortunately, those are the rules that do need to be compliant with.
Yeah, and I think that sort of touches on the question the Medway Yacht Club asked earlier about tables inside. Is this the rule of 6, or can 2 households larger than 6 meet up? And secondly, can business meetings take place again? Interesting. Business meetings, I'm curious, because you're not a bubble, are you? You've got a mixed bunch of people. So Deirdre, you got your name against this one as well. So I'm going to come to Nathan first and see if you've got any other suggestions, Deirdre. So Nathan.
Okay, so the two households thing, yeah, you can exceed the rule of 6 if they're two linked households. That's not a problem. The business meetings thing, the maximum permitted numbers are disapplied for business meetings, but you should be operating the business meeting in a way which is as COVID safe and secure as possible. So you can have more than the 6, but people should be socially distanced. You should have things in place like excess, improved cleaning, require people to wear face masks, doing what you can to remove pinch points, having signage up, all that sort of thing. So you can exceed the 6, but you need to do it in a safe way.
Deirdre, this touches on a lot of the hospitality and leisure venues that facilitate business meetings or provide space and all the rest of it. Again, is something that you sort of got advice or guidance on at all from your team?
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, exactly as Nathan says. I mean, I think it's really important to remember that for a lot of our businesses, that actually the business events part of the business is very, very important. And between that and weddings, has been effectively shut down for a year. So I think there are opportunities within the guidelines to be able to facilitate. And I think particularly as people who've been working from home for a long time may be quite interested in getting together, but it's being able to facilitate that in a way that maintains that safety, that social distance. So all the things that Nathan was saying around putting those mitigations in place. But I think if you do have the space to be able to offer that sort of facility, it's another opportunity as the guidance starts to open up.
That's great. Now, Margaret Preedy from Rianos is on the chat here. I know you. Margaret, I'm going to come to you in a little moment because you raised a question around funding, but I want to just sort of touch on the whole events issues at the moment, of course, with gatherings. So we've got sort of obviously the rules around funerals, but weddings as well, because we're maxed at 30 at the moment. And sort of general live events. Where are we with the regulations around that at the moment? So Nathan, I'm going to come to you first. So live events, outdoor events, gatherings, festivals, all the sort of traditional summer activities we all enjoy. Where are we on that, and what's the timelines?
Okay, live events, outdoors from the 17th of May, they can go ahead again. Or everything I've already said about mitigation and doing it safely applies. The government have put in some hard and fast rules. What they've said is a maximum of 50% occupancy of your venue up to a maximum of 4,000 people. And that's if you like in a field or whatever, rather than a seated stadium. Everything I said earlier about the numbers in and out also applies here. So it's 4,000 in the venue at any one time. All of these places are going to have food and drink being sold to them as well. And all of the guidance that has been issued with regards to restaurants and pubs and etc. Would apply as well. So that all needs to be done in a COVID safe manner. The differences are things like theatre exhibitions, cinema exhibitions, all that sort of thing, where it is seated, you can take your food and eat it, eat at your seat. It doesn't need to be table service, anything like that. But the government have actually got guidance up on exactly what you can do, and I will try and dig out and drop it into the chat. For very, very large events, so for example, seated stadiums, all that sort of thing, if the seated stadium exceeds 16,000, that's the minimum number of seats that can be in it for it to apply, you can have a 25% cap up to 10,000 seats. So you can have significant large events now. You'll have to discuss it with Jim, because I know there is a process where you need to speak to the council and get permission for large events as well. So I suspect that Jim will be able to add some relevant information there as well. Sorry to jump you in, Jim.
That's fine. Now, I'm going to, Margaret, I don't know whether you can sort of unmute yourself, whether you just want to sort of come in and ask any further questions. I declare a slight interest because I know Margaret Preedy runs a dance school as well at that location, of which my daughter has been a participant, hence the familiarity here. But your question originally was around funding, and you mentioned the 21st of June. So if you haven't already been sort of contacted by Maidstone Borough Council, you need to get in contact with them, because they obviously are the providers of the various lockdown grants. And given the venue that you are, I would imagine you are probably eligible for the most recent Restart grant, which is designed to try and support you. But there is, of course, a couple of other little local ones as well, which may or may not apply depending on your circumstances. So, Margaret, can you hear us? Margaret, are you there? No. Okay, no problem. You can use the live. Oh, yes, you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're there. We're there. So, Margaret, obviously, I'm taking terrible advantage of the situation because I just happen to know your venue. So, I thought, are there any questions you'd like to ask the panel about how you when you can open? Because you mentioned the 21st of June.
Yes,
I was just wondering.
Well, I've got a couple of weddings coming up that are in the area before the 21st of June, and obviously we're keeping to the 30 guests. Now, I've got one of the weddings, they've only got 24 people. They're in my biggest room, which social distancing, we could have up to like 100 people. So, and we're now in this situation where they're saying they can't dance. Can they do their first wedding dance? You know, can the people get up and dance and perhaps wear face masks? It's causing a lot of upset to a lot of these people.
Okay, so who wants to wade in there first? So Nathan, hand up straight away. Thank you.
I can at least answer one of those questions. The government guidance says the first dance is permitted, although general dancing is not. So they've recommended that you use the dance floor for additional seating space to allow more social distancing. But no, you can have the first dance, but unfortunately what the legislation says is any venue which provides a dance floor and music for people to dance isn't allowed to be open. So if you're going to provide that service, you're not classed as a business that can open. So unfortunately, you can't offer dancing and music for dancing.
So the wedding could go ahead, but just no one's going to let us bust any moves there. It's only the bride and groom can do their bit. Unfortunately,
not. It does have to be a sit-down reception, so it'll be a meal.
Okay. Margaret, not great news, but will that change on the 21st of June? Do we know? Is that the plan?
The government has been quiet on exactly what it will be. All it has said is that they expect social distancing requirements to be removed from 21st of June and all other restricted large events to be able to go forward. So if the roadmap progresses, I would assume that 30 number is going to be removed, but I don't know for certain. Nobody can at this point.
And I imagine, Margaret, you're probably open for your dance classes again, are you, at the moment?
Yes, and I was just about to type in Anetta, what about my dance classes? So they're couples that are coming and they're dancing together around the room. I mean, is there any social distancing, any rules on that, of how many couples I can have in the room? I mean, obviously I'm not going to have loads of couples in at one time, but you know, is there any rules on that?
I don't know the specific rules with regards to classes and etc. on the top of my head, so I would suggest you come to us and I will get you more information on that. But just with regards to indoor gatherings, the number is capped at 6, so you would have to keep it to 6. Without looking, I don't know if there is the potential for multiple groups of 6, so making sure that nobody from each of those groups strays into the other group. That's something I'm going to have to look at, because there are exceptions for training and classes and all that sort of thing. So what I'd recommend is that Margaret get in touch with us through the 0333 602 300 and we'll get some specific time to talk to her.
Yeah, I think this, Margaret, I sense your frustration, because my wife's a wedding florist. So first of all, anyone that's involved with the wedding industry is feeling terribly victimized, because it seems to be, if you're in the wedding game, you're limited to 30, but you can go to a wake, get legless, and you're okay for numbers. So there's a real frustration, I recognize that. But clearly there are some specific classifications, I think, which will probably help free things up for you a little bit. You don't want to sort of fall foul of any compliance issues. So if you give the number a call that we've got in the chat here, 0333 602 300, one of the team there will take your details and then invite Nathan, one of the other team, to give you a call back and go through in a bit more detail precisely your circumstances. So that'll be a really helpful way of hopefully trying to sort of get you open a little bit sooner rather than later.
Okay,
You're very welcome, Margaret. Thank you very much for coming off mute there for us on that. Okay, so just watching the time, we are at 13:48-ish. So if you have any questions, can you start popping them in the chat? One in from Mike Knowles here, slightly more specific question. But is there guidance on bar games such as darts and snooker in a separate room? After the first lockdown, we specified the wearing of masks for dart players, maintaining social distancing, no mingling, and snooker players only in the snooker room, etc. Tracy, do you want to take this one? This is, again, sort of social distancing. I think we covered this a little bit. Mute. There you go.
No, I don't want this.
Oh.
I think that sort of my understanding is that indoors that you don't have to wear a mask if you are eating or consuming food and drink sitting down, but otherwise I would say that the rules are that you wear face masks. So dart playing, snooker, playing snooker from would require face coverings.
Yeah, so I guess if you're up on your feet, really is the golden rule there, isn't it? If you're standing up and you're moving around, then you need to be wearing a mask. Seems to be the sort of the general guidance. Nathan, anything to add to that one, or Jim?
Well, actually, Tudor, if I could just jump
in.
Yeah,
please do, Jim.
And also just to come back on some of the points that Nathan raised earlier on. Within the step regulations, you've still got, it's Schedule 3 that people need to be looking at, because way back at the beginning of this webinar, you were asking about gatherings, and the legislation is still set up around gatherings as well. So as people have said, you know, if you're indoors, it's 6 or 2 households, and even if there's no mingling between those. So this is where it comes into that point. Within the schedule, there are exemptions. So where you can go above and beyond that, but you've got to look at those to actually ascertain whether the activity you're doing is permitted or not. So as Tracy has just said, with things like darts, pool, snooker, that sort of thing, in theory, normally in a pub, people will be doing that with a drink somewhere close by. They can't do that. They've got to be seated all the time they're drinking. So it's almost like you've got to have a dry area. I don't know. It's not in the legislation, but if you think about it in a common sense approach, how else could you do it so those people aren't standing and drinking if they're then partaking in that activity? And it's very difficult to go through every single exemption in the schedule to give a definitive answer on that. So those sorts of specifics, people do need to come to us or any of the enforcement agencies, trading standards, whatever, to get the advice and guidance on their specific situation. And that's also the same for the events. And I know Nathan said there's a process. So anyone who is used to running events should be aware that their local authority, so their local district or borough authority, would have a safety advisory group.
That's right. Yes, I remember mentioning that.
Yep, they should go to their safety advisory group with their proposal for the event that they want to run, and then that safety advisory group can go through with them the best course of action they can have to have a safe event that can go forwards. So that's one thing I would ask everybody to do if they're listening into this now is if you are planning an event, please go to your safety advisory group with enough time for them to actually process, because there's lots of people out there. There's a big demand for events at the moment because everybody wants to get out and enjoy themselves. You know, if you give people enough lead time, they can come back to you and then hopefully process what you need to have your event run smoothly.
Now that may well have answered the question. Pavilion Events put in a question there: restrictions on events / updates for catering, which is very generic. And I know that Debbie Green has asked a question in the live chat here around, are the restrictions still the same for outside dining at restaurants and pubs, i.e. the 6 or 2 households? So outside dining, still the same rules? I think we're saying that's the case. Is that right, Jim?
Yes, at the moment, and Tracy can confirm if I've hopefully got this right, it still says if you're serving food and alcohol, it has to be seated. It doesn't define whether it's outdoors or indoors. It just now says you can do it indoors, whereas, no, sorry, currently you can't. It's got to be outdoors, but as of the 17th, you can do it indoors and outdoors. But
there you go, Debbie. So we're still sitting down, we're still table service, but it's now indoors as well as outdoors. I think seems to be the guide there.
If I could,
yeah, please do. Of course.
The only thing that I would add is, of course, that if you're having outdoors dining, the maximum number permitted to gather outdoors is now 30. So you could potentially have large groups of diners. operating in the same way, exactly the same way, but a larger table of people.
So that's true. Okay, so you're not 6 outside. You could have up to 30 potentially if they're Okay, that's quite encouraging for a bit of a big family gathering. If you've come from my family, there seems to be endless numbers of cousins and uncles. Okay, Mark's asked a question here about live music in pubs and bars. Who wants to take that one? Live music, pubs and bars. Go on, Nathan. Tracy.
I think it will be allowed after the 17th in indoor entertainment. Is that right, Jim?
I think so. I haven't seen anything to say to the contrary, because that's how this legislation is working. Previously it says you can't do it, and at the moment it seems to be silent on that matter, but we'd have to wait. I know this sounds a bit of a broken record, but until we get the new updated legislation, that's what it would appear to be, unless it is changed. So yeah, I agree with Tracy. Yeah,
excellent.
I think that's true, isn't it? Sort of, it's all subject to any guidance. I mean, I presume we chose today's date because we thought that we would have guidance for next week. Really.
We don't learn, do we? We just don't learn. We think we have, but it's not there yet. But we're doing what we can.
All I really would add is that you would need to follow. There is some guidance which has been published with regards to events and such. And if you're having a live musical performance in your venue, then you should be following the relevant guidance for that performance, even if it's not specific to restaurants, pubs, etc. So there is stuff on there on gov.uk which is specific to performances, and you should apply what you can to your business premise.
Excellent, that's great. Hopefully, Mark, that's answered your question. And yeah, I can see there's good news from Debbie's pleased with that. The fact we've got the 30 outdoors now, of course. So really long tables for picnics and stuff. That's fantastic. Okay, I'm just revisiting some of the questions that we had in. I'm going to come back. So talk of visiting, Deirdre, I'm going to come back to you. Rochester Cathedral, wonderful establishment. My understanding of the guidance is that school visits are permissible as long as we follow all the guidance in making the building safe and keep school groups away from general visitors. It's always a good idea, I find, when the school groups are roaming around, and I'm there too. Is that correct?
Yeah, so great question. And, you know, I mean, a small development, but actually very critical for an awful lot of our visitor attractions, because normally school trips are such a huge part of the business for our heritage attractions, particularly at the moment when we can't have international school groups. So yeah, the general rule for groups, and there was a very small window last year when we were able to accept group visits to our attractions, is to divide them into those smaller groups of 6. So you probably want to do that with a school group anyway. And again, you know, you will still need to be managing social distancing within the venue, both within the group, but also between the group and everybody else. So yes, it's doable. So thinking about, you know, if you have an educational resource space, how you're going to use that in advance, where people are going to eat, all of that sort of thing, because that still needs to be done in a socially distanced way. But yeah, a fantastic opportunity. Just on that, the other thing that we did get clarification on when this was raised before about groups generally, is that if you are a tour guide, you do not count as one of the group of 6. So, okay. So that is useful to know in terms of how you divide people up into their little little bubbles.
No, that's thank you. That's really useful as a twist there, just to make sure people have got the information together. So there's an interesting one. We've got a couple that we sort of covered off to some degree. Robily Limited has mentioned the question here: will the guidelines be the same as when we reopened last year? We do not have a garden area, so it's important to know about keeping customers and staff safe indoors. I would suggest we probably covered that earlier with, you know, the fact that keeping the sort of the face space and hands, etc., and sort of distance, to be able to try and make sure that we've got social distancing in place for indoor venues. So I think we've probably answered that question already. Quick one for you, Jim, here. There's one here. Bodylines asked the question: is there a plan to visit all salons in an area to check for compliance? This is you out with your leather jacket and your kosh again, isn't it? This is which is unfair, because there's nothing like that at all. Of course, you guys, as I said earlier, very, very helpful.
I think that all enforcement agencies would be looking at responding to issues that became available or we received information on. Other agencies will be out and about doing normal sorts of work, and if they see issues and concerns, they'll raise it with the business. And also virtually all of the enforcement agencies deal with incoming information from members of the public and other businesses as well. So if there is somebody who's doing something incorrect, then they would be dealt with. I suppose what I'm trying to say is it's a reactive situation rather than a planned situation to go out and about. If there are issues, then enforcement agencies reserve the right to deal with those issues as they see fit, to apply the resources they have across the county. So we don't normally tend to tell people we're going to go out on a certain day before we go and do it, because that can sometimes defeat the object. So it's a difficult one to answer, really. But
yeah, no,
if it comes to an enforcement agency's attention that somebody's not playing by the rules, then of course we would look to uphold the level playing field, because you know, everybody wants to get back out there and open up, and everyone wants to do it fairly. So enforcement agencies are there to support that position, to support the businesses who are doing it right. So you know, if you know there's somebody not doing it right, let the enforcement agencies know, and then we can deal with it.
Absolutely, we've all been in this together. Tracy, do you want to add something there?
Only that sort of, I know that we've split sort of the sectors between us, trading standards and ourselves, but it goes back to a question that came up in the chat about sort of other businesses not complying with social distancing rules within a restaurant setting. We will react to complaints that we receive, and we do get complaints from the public and from previous lockdowns, and sometimes they provide us with video evidence as well. But we will always go back to the business in the first instance to let them address the situation. It's when we get consistent non-compliance that we start sort of ramping it up. And I think the government have been quite they've set the fines quite high, haven't they? I mean, £10,000 is not a light fine to go by.
Absolutely, it's a hell of an incentive to, and yeah, we've seen some good prosecutions based on persistent offenders, really.
But you mentioned level playing field, or Jim mentioned level playing field. I think that's really important, and certainly within my 3 authorities, from the 12th of April, we have been going out and giving advice to all businesses about outside shelters, whether they're compliant and whether they've got the QR codes in place. So it has been an education sort of initiative, but we probably haven't got the resources to go to every business. So we have to fall back on intelligence-led.
Absolutely. And again, we are all in this together, you know, it's trying to make sure that people are doing the right thing. None of us want to go back to the lockdown. It's not good for business. It's not good for us individually. Deirdre, there was
sorry,
Jim, carry on.
Just say that's what the enforcement cell is there for, is to, you know, if we do start seeing certain issues with a certain sector, then obviously that's what the enforcement cell is there for, is to bring consistency in enforcement approach and, you know, how that can be dealt with. So yeah, the key thing is, if there are issues and concerns, then raise it, and then we can at least try and engage. Remember the 4 steps that we can try and engage and help people to get it right.
Jim, thank you. I'm conscious we've gone past 2. The risk of turning into pumpkins is now very, very real. So Deirdre, I was just going to ask you a question. There's one in here about decontamination. And again, you through your work dealing with businesses in this particular sector, of course, there's a lot of concern. What else can they do? You've mentioned about Good to Go scheme, and you put those links in there as well. Decontamination, good thing, bad thing, necessary? What would be your advice around that?
Well, I think it's also linked to the question that somebody asked in the chat about, are the rules the same this year as they were last year? And I think we've all kind of learned to our cost that they're almost the same, but they're changed slightly. So there is a lot of information which we've put on in the chat on the latest guidance. So worth going through that again, worth going through all your protocols, making sure that you've, you know, also refreshing things with your staff, you know, because people have been closed for a long time. I think there are specific rules around decontamination in relation to hospitality, and particularly in relation to hotels. So again, particularly if you have a COVID outbreak, so worth looking at that. But the most important thing is follow the protocols in terms of cleaning, do it well, do it visibly, because you will reassure your customers if you do that. I think also, to pick up on Tracy's point about the businesses that aren't managing it well, it was interesting that you know, she said that it's the customers that complain. Actually, they're the ones that will go, this is, you know, and I'm not sure I'll go back there because they're not managing it very well. So that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, we shouldn't obviously have enforcement, but actually it makes good business sense to do this well, because yeah, there's a lot of nervousness out there. We need to keep our customers reassured.
And a very sound commercial decision is always behind these sort of things. Deirdre, we're coming to the end, so I know there's an event that you wanted to mention to share with everybody if they wanted to sort of tap into that.
Well, this is my opportunity to give a shameless plug.
Yeah, do. I've been helping out my friends, so why not?
Well, it's some callers are on the line may be aware of our Kent Big Weekend, which sadly we weren't able to do last year for obvious reasons. So this is our event where tourism businesses offer free tickets for Kent residents. It's a great way. What we tend to find is that you might apply and win 2 tickets, but actually you bring your family of 4. So businesses really get a lot of extra footfall. It's a great way of driving footfall to our businesses, particularly at a time when we need it. So it will be, it's normally a weekend, but it's our bigger weekend this year because it's actually lasting for a month. So it'll be on the 26th of June. And businesses will be able to offer tickets, but they can be redeemed during a period of a month. And the idea behind that is to give businesses a chance to have more footfall for longer, but also, you know, it gives people more opportunity to take advantage of those offers. We're also working with colleagues in Essex and Sussex, so we'll be doing opening it out to residents of Essex and Sussex to also apply, and we'll also be running a bigger weekend in Essex and Sussex that people can apply to. So if you're a business and you want to offer some tickets, go onto the Visit Kent website. I think Kay has dropped something in the chat which says how to get involved.
There's a link in the chat there,
and if you're not a tourism business, but you have friends and family you haven't seen for a long time, when the ballot opens on the 31st of May, do get involved, do come along, because our businesses need all the support they can get.
There's a question just been asked by Helen Bradshaw, so we can get this very quickly. Can we specify the dates to the visitors redeeming Kent Big Weekend tours, etc.? Can we specify the dates?
Yes, you can. It's always good to be as flexible as possible within that period if you can, but if you need it to be on a particular date, then yes, that's fine too. But yeah, be flexible, be generous. I would say that's probably the best way you're going to get some traction.
Always, you're always looking for the new business. Let's generate some opportunities. Before I let everybody go, I'm going to ask Matt just to ping up a poll, just so you can say how wonderful we all are and what a great job we've done here today. Or feel free to give your true opinion and verdict. So whilst that's being completed by our very kind delegates here. I think this has been, again, a very, very useful session for all involved. If you are looking for funding questions that are very specific, again, I would encourage you to sort of book some one-to-one time, either with some of the panelists here or with the advisors through the Growth Hub. Ring the number 03333 602 300. The team there will take details and contact, or pass you on to Deirdre and her team and others who will be able to call you back and sort of give you the support you need. We've also posted in the live chat a link that sort of goes to the email alerts that come from the Growth Hub. So whenever there's a new grant scheme or a new business support scheme launched, we send an email out. So again, if you want to sort of keep track of that, you're more than welcome to sign up there. For now, I think we've got the polls in there. It looks pretty good. So thank you very much indeed, Matt. I think you've got the numbers we need. And it's looking positive. You've obviously done a good job. So thank you very much indeed for your kind words there. Thank you sincerely to our expert panel as ever, who are wading through the legislation, which is in some cases very draft and very late to the party. But well done. Thank you one and all to Deirdre Wells from Visit Kent, to Tracy Beattie from Environmental Health, to Steve and Sarah from Water, to Jim and Nathan from Trading Standards. Thank you all very much indeed again. Remember, the email for this will follow in a few days once we've done some editing to it. But for now, thank you very much indeed. Please stay safe and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you all, and goodbye.